by now, most of us don't want to discuss anything more on Corona. But in this case of the study, COVID opened an opportunity to do research on a survey, which I think might be helpful on discussing how to deal with which topics. Most interesting for me was the fact that the research was done in all 3 Baltic states at the same time in the same method. And in this case, the results are somehow comparable. I found the results as well very interesting, and I would like to all of you, sorry, I wish all of us an interesting discussion after the presentation. I don't want to take too much time out of an opening, and so I give back to Gunter Slorga. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. And now the floor goes to 3 researchers, Andres Joesaar from Tallinn, Andres Joesaar from Riga, and Deimantas Jastramskis from Vilnius. The floor is yours.
Hello to everybody. I will start sharing the screen and putting the presentation on right now. Thank you, Elizabeth. It's really pleasure to present a dream of researchers. Actually, we have struggled to get the data, comparable data for 3 countries quite a long time, and this is at least one of the very nice examples when we have succeeded. So, but starting with the presentation itself, we hope we don't we will not overload you with too many numbers, but there will be a couple of slides and the charts which try to give you the overall understanding about the situation of media in the Baltic countries. And as said, the question is to trust or not to trust. And we had a study with 3,000 respondents, 1,000 in each country, and the age group was 15 to 74. 10% were telephone interviews and 90% of web surveys. And the period was October, November last year, so it was quite recent. We had 16 blocks of questions. It's about media consumption, importance of information channels, reliability of information channels providing information on COVID, and then special focus on public service media activities and attitudes towards various sources of information and opinions on the socio-political events. And also we looked into questions related to journalism and discussion in the media about the journalism. Part 1, starting with overall description of media consumption in all 3 countries. We had a question, and which is starting point for our presentation. Following the news in the media channels by different age group. And here I present the data about population which at least 1 or more times a day look for a news on different platforms. This chart describes the picture in Estonia. You can see that television is not so favorable anymore among young people, and it gets popular, people getting wiser, sorry, older, I meant. So, and what is common for all the countries, you can see that social media, which is very popular in young age groups, it's still relevant also for elderly people. And one conclusion, we can say for all 3 countries is that the platforms, the internet platforms are coming to be the main source of getting information about the news. This is a picture about Latvia. It's pretty much the same, social media for a young, television for a little bit elderly people, and social platforms for everyone. Radio and printed, and especially printed newspapers, are much lower. And the same picture, a little bit different graphics, but it's relevant for Lithuania too. Again, television versus social media and platforms for everybody. Looking into more detailed, what are the most important information channels to get the information about our daily life? We asked the question, information on current events can be obtained from various sources. How important are the following information channels for you? And we had a list of information channels we can compare in all 3 countries. Here you can see a comparison of 3 countries. The most relevant is to get information from friends and neighbors and colleagues. And the second point, it's a little bit more different by country. In Estonia, on the second position was public service television. If you look on Latvia and Lithuania, then the situation is a little bit different. In Latvia, yes, public service media, it doesn't have such an important role, and more important are private portals. And in Lithuania, if you look on the line, and on the line on Lithuania, I will skip back, then it's more on a private television, which is not the case in Latvia and in Estonia. Here again, it's as this describes the whole audience from age to 15 to 74. If to look into different age groups, starting from the youngest one, you can see there is a pretty different picture. For young people in all countries, social media is rather and more important, as the most important channel for getting information, as you can see from here. And in Lithuania, very special, you can see private television. In Latvia and Estonia, public service portals, and also, of course, friends and colleagues are relevant for all the countries. If to go to the other side of the scale, it took the audience from 65 to 75, then it's more similar actually for all the countries, but still Lithuania, it's a little bit different from Latvia and Estonia, but at the end, you can see in all countries, the public service television are the most reliable or most important channels for obtaining information. In the language groups, the same question, and if we look into this one, we'll take Lithuania first. Here, for Lithuanian people or Lithuanian language audience groups, the main source of information are public television channels. But for Russian speakers and Polish audience, these are still relevant, but not as high as for the majority. In Latvia, again, it's a little bit different. You can see it's a little bit slightly different, and in Estonia, it's also a little bit different. The differences between Estonian speakers and Russian speakers. But this is not the most interesting finding we had from our survey. If we look into the question, how reliable do you think these channels were in providing information on the COVID virus and pandemic? Then you can see it's, you can see that it's really interesting to see that in all countries, actually, what we can see is that people don't trust Russian media, alternative non-professional media, blogs, and social media. It's pretty much the same picture for all the countries. And sorry, it jumps for some reasons. Let's do. And it is what is trusted in these countries. Again, you can see that the public service media has a pretty high position. In Estonia, it might look like it is the strongest channels, but also in Lithuania and Latvia, still the public service media, television, radio, and portals together are the strongest one. And this is an index when the positive and negative opinions are summarized, and it gives the result. It's the bias towards which platform people are more, which platforms people trust more and which they don't trust. And I hope this picture tells quite a lot about the situation. So if to look into public service media, then we had quite many questions, and here will just come as selections of the overall situation. When we ask the questions about public service media as such, all the portals, radio, and the television, And here the three countries you can see. What is interesting actually is that in Latvia, these attitudes towards public service broadcasting is a little bit more negative than in Lithuania, and again, Lithuania has had a little bit more negative attitude towards public service broadcasting than Estonia. At the same time, the people who totally trust public service broadcasting actually are in Estonia and Lithuania in the same amounts. That's something which is really interesting. And as we have data from previous surveys, and there's a trust in the public service broadcasting portals has never been as high as it is in these. And here it's a really nice example that internet or news online services are absolutely crucial to have on public service broadcasting, because these are really trusted and are also important for the audiences. Then, based on the previous chart, I made a trust index for public service broadcasting, and it summarizes the picture. It needs deeper investigation and analysis to see what are the reasons behind. But again, this describes these attitudes or the relation between people who said they really trust or rather trust, or they don't trust or rather don't trust. In Estonia, the index is quite high, and for some reasons in Latvia it is pretty low, if I can say so. Then part of questionnaire covers valuation of public service media activities. And here comes a list of 16 different criteria. We will not go deeply into this one, and all the questions actually we asked are listed here. It is shared or divided into three main areas. It's about culture, it's about society, and it's about activities of public service broadcasting. Summarized. Again, here comes the index, the relation between positively and negative opinions, and the countries are shown here. Pretty similar, the picture, that the lines in all three countries are on the same, that people believe that public service broadcasting is strong in the areas which are connected to coverage of cultural events. They present diversity of the world. They are useful everybody, and it brings information to everybody. These areas are relevant for all public service in all three countries. And the similarities, the audience actually don't believe that public service broadcasting is independent of political influences and economical influences when developing their programs. And in Latvia, again, the scale is shifted towards negative opinions. And what I would like to point out in the case of Latvia is the second here, the opinion about public service activities which are related to a diversity of the world to the audience. And these are pretty low. And also that in Latvia, if you can see, the audience is not feeling that public service broadcasting strongly supports the development of democracy in the country. And then the last part in my presentation, it's public service broadcasting and coverage of political parties. And this is something which is really interesting to watch. These are differences in between the all three countries are really strong ones. The question was, please assess how, in your opinion, public service broadcasting reflects activities and views of various political associations. and answers options in first one in a very good light and the last one in a very bad light. And what are the outcomes? In average, in all the countries, first is Estonia, you can see this blue one, they say that's impartially, that majority of the people say it's impartially. There are differences between the parties. I will come to these differences in 2 slides later. And quite a lot of people, actually, 1/3 of respondents didn't have opinion about the question at all. In Latvia, the situation, it's a little bit different, but still quite a big part of people here in the blue say that it's impartiality was the main driver. But here in Latvia, more than half of the audience or respondents didn't have opinion on this question. And that's interesting. And when to go to Lithuania, here, the same majority people believe that public service broadcasting is neutral in the coverage, and roughly as in the case of Estonia, it's roughly the same. 30% of the respondents didn't have opinion on that question. Now I made an index based on this negative positive valuation, and here is a picture I'm saying that it's really interesting to see. Starting from the below, here in the bottom is valuation of public service broadcasting of Estonia. You can see that people who had opinions that this public service broadcasting put some party in a very good light or in a very negative light, there is clear difference. Audience believes that Reformierakond, Eesti 200, Social Democrats actually are shown in a little bit better light here. And so just the one party which is strongly in the negative. It's our right-wing conservative party, EKRE. In Latvia, I cannot comment I cannot comment the political situation and what might be the reasons, but I think it's interesting to see, and it needs further investigation why the picture is as it is. That majority of the audiences believes that public service broadcasting covers all these parties in a negative light or corresponds. And Lithuania is somewhere in the middle here. Still, majority of the parties, by opinion of respondents, are covered or shown or put into negative light, and there is 4 parties which are shown in a positive light. This is something which needs definitely further investigation. And we had a question about 10-point scale at how important is public service broadcasting and also private media for a society and for you personally. For society, in majority actually, people felt the public service is needed for a society. Estonia has quite many people who believe that it's strongly needed for a society. It's a picture is pretty much the same for all countries. When we ask a question about importance of commercial media for a society, you can see that it's not a very strong opinion that it's strongly needed, and in all countries. And when we ask a question about importance for personally for the respondent, then it's not so important as it was felt for a society. Again, Estonia is a little bit higher, and majority of respondents believes that it's important for them too. And the private media, it's pretty much the same for all the countries. And very short conclusions of this part. The first one is, among media platforms, social media is more popular among younger people and television among older people. News portals are equally important for all age groups. I would like to underline this, that this is the first survey, at least that in my hands, that shows that news portals are really, really relevant for everybody. Second point was that in all three countries, communication channels are the most important way to communicate with friends and acquaintances. In second place are ETV in Estonia, private news portals in Latvia, and private television channels in Lithuania. In this sense, the countries are a little bit different. And according to the respondents, the position of public service media, including credibility and political balance, is strongest in Estonia and the weakest in Latvia. Now we will switch over to part 4, and Anda, please take over from here.
Okay, good afternoon, dear colleagues. This is my pleasure to continue presentation of our data. I'll continue with my presentation to control the way how we are talking. Today I'm officially, according to my background, I'm representing Riga Stradiņš University, but one part of my identity strongly belongs to establishers, the Baltic Center of Media Excellences. Well, part 4, from a lot of data and still only not all of those data, I'll continue looking for stories behind of those data, and something in the upcoming slides will explain those previously shared data by Andres on media use. I'll start with the very important questions on how respondents in Baltic sees diversity of views, how open are our respondents to the information and opinions which they do not agree. And then you can see first but not last slide on the picture which is not uniform. You can see more than third, even more than 40% in Latvia of those who disagree with that statement, who think themselves that they are open to opposite opinions. But there is, I would say that with similar importance, it is that another group, at least 1/4 in each country, of those who say that they are not ready or they don't see any reason for seeking information and opinions which they don't agree. To continue this story on how open are our societies in our countries to opposite opinions, there is one more question. Are people interested in discussions in social media? Are they like to compare professional media and social media discussions? And you can see that majority, more than half, are ready to follow what's going on in both environments, in professional and social media. And then next, how our respondents reacted on statement, how they perceive situation when media disseminate information and opinions that are not acceptable to them, like very opposite, unacceptable. Are they stop using those kind of media? I put in a headline like very strict this statement that those are confirmation bias. I would say that a bit softly, it's a readiness to put your energy to understand even unacceptable opinions. And this is very complicated picture according to the data. There are at least 3 important groups in this part of our research, you can see that more than 40%, a bit less, more than a third in Lithuania, are those who agree with that. They agree with that statement that they stop using those media with unacceptable opinions. And almost the same is those who oppose. A bit less, of course, like 1/3 in Latvia, Lithuania, and quarter among Estonian respondents. And then next part will explain a bit how people perceive various sources of opinion and information in this very saturated information environment with many various sources, how they evaluate importance of those sources. And then you can see that still largest part of respondents rely on the professional media, and they don't support that social statement that social media influencers are more understandable than content offered by professional media. But again, still you can see about 1/5 of respondents who believe that it's enough to have social media influencers' opinions for them. And I will continue with so-called folk theories of news use. Those theories were defined by Rasmus Claes Nielsen according his audience-focused research in 2016. And before that, when we were developing design of this research, we decided to diagnose are those folk theories are relevant in Baltic states. And now you can see, while I was explaining the essence of this part, now you can see this first folk theory related with nowadays information environment, when people really perceive the situation that they are not, don't need to purposefully follow news. They shouldn't look to news because thanks to algorithms and other digital communication rules, most important news will find them on social media. And again, this chart is not uniform. We can see the group, about 1/3 of respondents who agree with that statement, and the same group which disagree, not disagree, but with those who don't have any opinion on this. And then there is like about more than 1/3 in Latvia and Lithuania, and more than half of those who don't agree with this statement. But there is one more interesting folk theory on news use, which is related with this very difficult situation with disinformation, when more and more people feel that they cannot understand what to believe in and what not to believe in. And this is a reason why they are consuming professional media less and less, because they have to put more and more energy to differentiate quality of information. And according those data, those are like only general data, and still we can see many groups there is no uniform picture behind those data. We can see like 1/3 which agree with that, and in Latvia comparing with Estonia and Lithuania, there are more people than who agree with that. And this part is is larger than those who disagree with this statement. Those data says that there is a big problem related with effects on disinformation perception in society. And one more folk theory, which says that if there is so many attractive information sources and social networks are among most influential information sources nowadays, then probably the role of professional media has diminished. And there is no need to consume professional media information. And again, you can see from data, we are far from normative perception of media role. We can see that there are a lot of people, and again, more Latvian respondents supports that statement, and Estonians are opposed to this statement more to compare with Latvian and Lithuanian respondents, but still there are quite large groups which looks differently to this statement. To put those many data together, we try to combine habitual and attitudinal factors to find out how societies in Baltic states perceive modern media environment. We can observe that higher trust in social media and more active social media use means that those respondents don't trust and lower rely in lower scale rely on professional media work. Then we try to diagnose openness to diverse opinions expressed in media, and then we can observe almost two similar parts. About a third of respondents try to seek information to get view on various opinions, even they don't agree with those opinions. And then about a similar number of respondents agree that if media disseminates information that are not acceptable to them, that they probably will not continue to use those media. The second conclusion part, when we analyze attitude of respondents about content of social media, we can see like conflicting groups or contradictory pictures. More than half of respondents are really interested to compare professional and social media discussions. And similarly, there are this group which more than half, but not like majority of respondents, who strongly disagree that information and opinions provided by social media influencers are more understandable to the audience than content offered by professional media, which means that there is no question on understandability or misunderstanding of those opinions. There is something more behind those data. And to compare Baltic states, you already noticed probably from media usage data difference between our countries. Then Estonian respondents demonstrated less willingness to seek various views, but they in all kind of questions more strongly supported importance of professional media work. They really clearly recognize the role of professional media and professional journalism, while Lithuanian respondents less likely than Estonian and Latvians agree that media content is not acceptable due to differing views, which means they are more open to meet opposing opinions. And finally, when we analyze those mentioned new trends in news perceptions, those folk theories, we can see again results where particular groups of respondents could be identified. 1/5 of those surveyed agrees that they not follow professional media because there is enough news in social media environment, and those news find those respondents. Again, Estonians are less sure about that statements. Each third or each fifth in Estonia believes the social media information probably is replaceable and there is no need for professional media work. And yes, there is the same amount of respondents who disagree with that. And this is one more time very, very disturbing and trend that about a third of respondents feel really disoriented because of big amount of disinformation that comes from various sources, and this leads to less professional media use. And finally, we can observe particular groups according to our data, and I think it's a very important part of our surveys, that there are particular groups within audience, within societies emerging, and those groups are not determined by social demographic characteristics. Of course, there are some trends, but mostly not related with demographics. Of those who use social media more, and I would like to remind that in Latvia, mid-age and even older generation respondents use social media as much as Estonian youngsters. Latvians are more active in social media use than Estonians and Lithuanians. And yes, that partly those who belong to active social media users rely of information that is disseminated within social media, but this is not the same group. About a third of surveyed, they admit that they avoid diverse or opposing information. Even if in Estonia, this group is not as big as in Latvia, in Estonia, it's a big proportion if you look at societies in our countries. But we can conclude this changes in media use change attitude toward professional media, towards disinformation, various information sources, and gradually we can follow this changing process when societies or particular members of some groups are not recognize role professional media, or actually don't see this role as very important for society and for the individuals. Thank you.
Deimantas, now is your part.
Hello for everybody. My part is about professional journalism and relation with democracy, what is very important, and because journalism may have some significant impact on public decision-making and the development of quality of democracy by informing citizens. The journalistic activity itself is intertwined with political, economic, and social factors, and it's exposed to various risks related to the content control, some market structure changes, and what is especially important in our case, the changes in audience preferences, especially in the global platform environment and in social media influences. Therefore, in our study, we sought to find out what the people of the Baltic States think about professional journalism and its impact on democracy. And the following statement was made to respondents as follows. For the most part, journalists cover events and problems truthfully and objectively. As we can see, only about a third of respondents agree with such a statement. Another quarter or slightly more respondents neither agree or disagree with such a statement. It is characteristic choice of answers when it comes to assessing the performance of participants in the entire journalist or media field. Because, of course, the activities from some journalists, editors, or editorial staffs can be assessed as fair and objective, while the evaluations of other media can be completely reversed. Setting journalists for personality shown by the diversity information and sources in the media. In this respect, the evaluation of performance of the public service broadcaster is very important. Therefore, one of the statements made to our respondents was that public service media reflects all the important issues of society. As you can see, almost 60% of the Lithuanian and Estonian respondents agreed with this statement, and about half of the respondents in Latvia agreed also. However, when asked about PSM provides opportunities for representation of different groups and professions to speak, the number of respondents who agreed with the statement varied considerably across the three countries. Almost two-thirds of those surveyed in Estonia, and half in Lithuania, and less than half in Latvia. And about credibility of professional media, because this is significant in times of social crisis. As the chart show, there are 20 percentage points more such people in Estonia than in Latvia and Lithuania. As shown by the data on trust in the different media segments during the COVID crisis, public service media in all three countries earned the most fruitful from audience. And well, one of the key questions in this section is whether professional journalism makes an important contribution to the development of democracy. In Estonia, the role of professional journalism in the development of democracy was recognized by two-thirds respondents. In Lithuania, almost 60%, and in Latvia, just over 50%. I think it is good news for all the Baltic countries, considering the role of entire media system together. Because as we can see in this chart, the contribution of public service media to the development of the democracy alone as assessed is little more modestly. In Estonia and Lithuania, just over half of the population agrees with the statement. in Latvia, less than half of respondents. And finally, it is interesting to know which age groups evaluate more positively or negatively whether professional journalism makes an important contribution to the development of democracy. As can be seen from this chart, most older people in Lithuania and Latvia, aged between 65-74, agree that journalism makes an important contribution to the democracy. However, most of such respondents were among the youngest age group, between 50 and 44 years in Estonia. And who was more skeptical? It is respondents aged 25, 30, 34 in Latvia, and respondents between 35 and 44 in Lithuania and Estonia, as we can say, as some kind of middle-aged people. They were more skeptical regarding such statement. And conclusion. Best conclusion from this subchapter that media users in Baltic states are quite critical regarding implementing of the basic principles of journalism to cover it truthfully and objectively on the scale of all media systems. But however, public serious media activities, it's just comprehensiveness of information and diversity of sources and opinions are assessed much more positively. Second conclusion, residents of Estonia tend to rely more on professional journalists during social crisis than residents of Lithuania and Latvia. And last, but I think not at least, conclusion that most of the Baltic population think that professional journalism contributes to the development of democracy. In Estonia, mostly young people, in Lithuania and Latvia, older generation. That is some kind of difference. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Deimantas. Thank you, Anda and Andres. And now there is a possibility for the audience comments and questions. I presume there is quite a big interest from people because there are many requests for video recording and presentation and data. So you have raised interest. And now I see the first hand raised by Kristina Hudenko. Please, Kristina.
I want to ask, what is your opinion? Why Estonians tend to rely more professional journalism than in Latvia and Lithuania?
So who will be first to answer? Anda, Andres?
Maybe because I was last and was question regarding professional journalism. Difficult to say, but the hypothesis may be that this correlation with trust with some media channels and regarding some media in Estonia, more trust people to public service media. This shows some data and, regarding COVID information distributed in media, and I think that this information regarding COVID media show that more residents in Estonia trust and say positive in the regards with the professional journalists and their role in the social crisis and to development regarding democracy. But it is difficult to say exactly. It is need to more to deep analysis in some cases with the qualitative research because we have some quantitative data.
Any other comments from experts on this question?
Yes, if I may add briefly, of course, we can see another data to explain the situation. And one answer relies on the specificity of media systems and the role of public service media in each country. And for example, my explanation of Latvian situation, which is much lower than in other countries, is related with this insufficient funding for many years for public service media and politicization of public service media. And there is a very good overview of Jesper Strömbäck on trust in media in European Union, where is the clear link between political quality and trust in politics. Like link between trust in politics and trust in public service media, and I think in Latvia we can see that kind of relations. Thank you.
Andres, any comments, or we go further?
Let's take a next question. If
Okay,
so.
then next questions from Kristīna Žilde-Krēvica.
Yes, hello, everyone. One of the most worrying conclusions seems that more and more people choose social media over professional journalism, and Estonia is in a slightly better place. Therefore, the question goes to Estonia first. From Tallinn University, what can you suggest Latvia do? Because education is one thing, but if we start just now, we'll see the difference in, let's say, 20 years or so. Is there a more effective and, let's say, less time-consuming solution when it comes to improving media literacy? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I don't have a clear answer on this one, but I believe that if we look into the differences in the media system, and as Sanda mentioned, its funding of public service broadcasting can be one of the keys. And why the funding is important? Because funding should be related to the quality. And if the quality which is provided for the audiences is really high, and I don't mean only the news, but the overall quality, including drama and programs for children and so on, maybe the audience starts to believe that this is something which is meant really for them. And this might attract the audience from the social media, which is providing a lot of entertainment and different kind of formats to link to it. Maybe this will help to attract the attention of the audiences towards quality journalism. But this is hypothesis. We should test it.
The others are welcome to join their opinion as well. Maybe Andres Joesaar, if I may to ask you to answer in Latvian, if that's possible, please.
Okay, I'll try. Sorry for those who are not speaking Latvian. Jā, es gribētu piekrist, ka...
Sorry, I interrupt you. This is not fair. I don't understand what you are telling.
I understand this is for recording for television. I will translate in English what Andres says in short.
Okay.
Jā, es gribētu atbalstīt kolēģa pozīciju, ka arvien skaidrāk ir jābūt izprotamai profesionālās žurnālistikas lomai, bet Latvijas problēma ir tiešām saistīta ar to, ko jūs jautājāt, ar tādu kopīgo mediju pratībā balstīto izpratni un vērtību jautājumu, kas liecina par vērtīgu informāciju, vai cik liela vērtība ir neatkarīgai profesionālai žurnālistu informācijai. Un, manuprāt, tas ir ļoti sarežģīts jautājums, risināms visai profesionālai mediju videi tuvākajā laikā, kā vienoties ar savām auditorijām, kas ir žurnālistu un profesionālu mediju vieta, kādā veidā iespējams sadarboties, izskaidrot šīs informācijas svarīgumu, kam iespējams nav pieticis laika tādā smagā, aizrautīgā darbā, darot savu darbu un domājot, ka tā nozīme ir pašsaprotama. Izrādās, ka konkurences apstākļos tas nav tik vienkārši, un ne tikai konkurence, bet arī sabiedrības attīstība prasa atkal definēt no jauna žurnālistikas uzdevumus.
I will now try in very short, and agrees what colleagues said before, that we should explain more what is the role of professional journalists, and when it comes to Latvia, it's very important to think about media and information literacy as a whole, as a holistic approach, and really thinking what are our values and what is more important, not only values as big ones, but what is importance of professional media, what are the roles they are playing in the society, and what is more important to really work with this challenge, how to work with audiences and convince them that there is a need for professional journalism and that the professional journalism is serving wide societies. This is a very short summary. So, Christine, do you have any other questions, or we can move further?
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's it.
Then Leif Flonsman is next in the line.
Thank you very much. Here is Copenhagen, Denmark. I represent the Nordic Journalist Center, and I'm a former director of the National Public Service Radio in Denmark. I noticed that the perception of coverage of political parties in all countries were considered very biased in favor of some parties and disfavor of other parties. That seems to be the perception of the audiences. Do any of you have any consideration or observation on whether this is representative for the media coverage from professional journalism, that it has a bias towards or against certain political parties? Because that's a potential threat for the trust in professional media.
If I may start, that I must actually, I will share the screen again to make one correction. If you say that it's totally biased, it's not the case. As I mentioned, maybe, yeah, oh, sorry, it was really, if I jump to this political parties question, and it's, hope it will be, sorry, I will jump to the, here, to underline, the blue says that the coverage impartial, meaning that to say it's totally biased, it's not the case. Majority of people actually believe that the coverage is not biased. Only these people who have opinion here and in this hand have opinion. So what comes to the index, what I showed, it's based only on 20% of the audiences. So 30–40% of the audiences actually believes that public service broadcasting is neutral. But what comes to the question if the journalism is biased, I believe that all the countries we have gut feeling, we don't have a content analysis that journalism is biased. It's how much and how deep, and is it good or bad? It's a question for research. We don't have a data, and actually we don't have even good methodology on how to investigate or research these questions. But we can say that, for example, newspapers, if we take Postimees in Estonia and Delfi or Eesti Express, the gut feeling is that they have their own how to put it, it's not a political opinion, but they have a different sets of values they are supporting. I'm not saying that one is right and the other one is wrong. That's not the question. But we can feel that the values are slightly different. One is more conservative, one is more liberal. Which is the right one or a wrong one, I cannot comment on this one. I don't believe that anyone has answer on this question.
I have short additional sentence on those big groups in each country, and the largest again comes from Latvia, where almost half of respondents don't know how a public service media, they don't have any opinion on how public service media represents political party, and we should find out, are they what's the combination? Are they don't use public service media, or are they don't interest in political issues? But I think it's too big proportion of respondents with no opinion.
Okay, then we can move forward with a question from Marina Kovalyova. Marina, can you hear us?
Hello, yes.
Yes.
And we have seen that in Estonia, people use more public media, and in general, young generation trust more than journalists have a high role in democracy. It's questions maybe to Andres. What do you think? Is it linked with that? Exactly in Estonia, you have public TV channels for Russians, in Russian languages, and maybe society not so divided, and because of this, more trustful in public media. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I cannot answer directly, but what I can tell you is that my academic research with Estonian Russian-speaking audiences and diversity of audiences has been going on for 10 years. And there is a quite big change made in 2015 when ETV Plus was launched. The audience was divided. Before that, it was divided very, very clearly into two language-based communities. And now in this research, we can see that the trend Russian-speaking audiences is trusting more and being in favor of public service broadcasting is continuing in a positive way. So we can say that yes, there is an impact of ETV Plus, but it cannot be explained only with this fact. But yes, for Russian-speaking audiences, ETV Plus has been a positive change. I don't know if it answers the question, but this is the case.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Christina, did you raise your hand once more?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Maybe my question is continue Marina's question, but in what languages was this survey conducted, and how strongly did the answers depend on the language of the respondent?
It was in Estonia, it was in Estonian. I'm pretty sure that in Latvia, and it was in Latvian and Lithuanian.
Only.
What means only?
But was it in Russian also?
No,
for an English?
Representative according to the structure of societies in each countries. Which means in Latvia and Estonia there were as well Russian questionnaire translated for Russian speakers, and Polish, as far I know, in Lithuania.
And how strongly did the answers depend on this questions respondent language?
There were some difference already demonstrated in terms of media use. For me, that was the surprise that for Latvian Russian-speaking respondents, there were not so big importance of Russian TV channel as expected or surveyed before. This is changing trend already for several years as like new generations use another media. But speaking about other very important questions, even those which we couldn't include in presentation, like attitude towards alternative media role and their usage, attitude towards COVID representation and trust of COVID related information or COVID disinformation. there is no big differences. For me, the big surprise is this support of Estonian young generation to professional media and even public service media. I think we should go to Tallinn to learn a lot from Estonians. Because in Latvia we cannot attract young and minority audiences, but other questions were quite unrelated with the language spoken in families.
Thank you, Anda. And now Stefan Eriksson.
Oh, hello. Thank you for 3 interesting presentations. I'd like to ask if there's any comparable research that was done before the pandemic, and if based on that you can make any conclusions if the media's handling of the pandemic has sort of say improved the situation, or on the contrary has made it worse. I don't know if it's possible to comment on that. Would be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may start, and yes, part of the questionnaire was designed based on the questionnaire we had in Estonia for 2010, 14, 17, 19, and now 21. So part of the question, especially connected to reliability and trustworthiness and importance of public service broadcasting in Estonia, are useful. Unfortunately, we don't have the same questionnaire for all the countries. But yes, we can see, at least for Estonia, we can conduct some conclusions. And I have already done, these are the different surveys comparison with the earlier years. And very short answer to the question, and its simplification of the answer is that overall trust into public service, overall trust into media is in decline. It's the same as in whole Europe. But in the case of Estonia, the last survey shows that public service broadcasting has gained back a little bit. No, not a little bit, quite a lot. Maybe Anda and Deimantas, you will.
Yeah, briefly continue with this comparativeness of those research. Trust in media has been researched for many years, but usually there are some slight differences in the questions. There is no big surprises according new data, but there was one very interesting survey in 2013 conducted by my university colleagues on openness to diverse and opposite opinions, and I would say that situation is about the same. And regarding public service media, I think that the situation, the COVID crisis, actually public service media benefited, because even it sounds like a paradox, but we can see that still, even with critical attitude, even with some distrust to public service media, they are still a most trustful source in times of crisis, and I hope that in each country they will continue this kind of development.
Well, in Lithuania, we have quite good piece data about public service media, and maybe we can compare some data in the same year, 2021, because there was quite a comprehensive survey on spring, and this was on November. But we have a gap when we want to compare commercial media. There are a little bit data earlier in Lithuania, and this comprehensive survey are first regarding commercial media and alternative media and populistic media.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? This is your last opportunity. If not, then as I already promised on the chat, we will send to all today's participants the presentation. We are also going to share video, but it could take some time, and I cannot promise that it will be in your mailboxes today, but please be patient. And I really want to say a lot of thanks to our researchers, and once more to Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I think this is really a very profound research and a lot of things to think about, both for media and also for the wider societies, how we build this trust and how we really rely on professional media.